when Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate economist teaching at Harvard, wrote a book a few years ago. He released it when he was at Harvard, called The Argumentative Indian. Immediately, I looked in that book to see where is Ambedkar. He's an argumentative Indian, right? One of the most in 20th century for sure.
Yeah.
He's not in the book. He's in a footnote toward the end. So Dr. Sen, Professor Sen, had a party releasing the book.
Okay.
It was mainly South Indian students at Harvard who came to that thing. There was maybe 100, 200 students in the room. He gave a talk. What is in my book? All these people. So Q&A, look around.
Are you there?
You were there. And so I raised my hand and said, where is Dr. Ambedkar in your book? Is he not the argumentative Indian of the 20th century? Professor Sen basically said, that's a very smart point, a very good point. Next question, please.
Oh,
he
very
didn't
smartly
even
passed this question.
He just passed the question that Attenborough made in the 70s, which is so long that you have to take an intermission to eat popcorn and then come back and see that second half. Attenborough learned about Ambedkar when he was in India, making that movie. He wanted to go back and make the Ambedkar movie.
Okay.
And so
He
wanted to make the Ambedkar movie because he was so impressed. Wow, this man is at least as great as Gandhi. And nobody knows, so then my movie will be very interesting to people. He tried to get visas for his crew to go over. Indian government would not give visas for that movie.
Okay.
It never got made because the Indian government would not give visas and permissions for that movie.
Okay. तो सर कह रहे हैं कि गांधी पे जो मूवी बनाई थी एडनबरो ने, तो उसके बाद उन्होंने जो बाबा साहब डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर के बारे में भी जाना और वो उनके ऊपर भी मूवी बनाना चाहते थे, लेकिन इंडियन गवर्नमेंट ने तब की वीज़ा नहीं दिया ताकि वो काम कर सके। बहुजन क्रांति और बहुजन नायकों को समर्पित दलित दस्तक का 2024 का शानदार बहुजन कैलेंडर आ चुका है। कैलेंडर छोटे और बड़े दोनों साइजों में उपलब्ध है। बुकिंग के लिए दिए गए नंबर पर व्हाट्सएप करें या ईमेल करें। थोक में ऑर्डर करने पर मिलेगी आकर्षक छूट। जय भीम, मैं हूं अशोकदास, आप देख रहे हैं दलित दस्तक। और जैसा कि आप देख सकते हैं हमारे साथ इस बातचीत में हैं क्रिस्टोफर एसपी, जो कि हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी में रह चुके हैं और इसके अलावा और बाबा साहब डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर पे इनका काफ़ी काम है। सो प्रोफेसर क्रिस्टोफर, you worked on lots of work on Buddhism. You know about Baba Saheb Dr. Ambedkar. We talked just now.
Yes.
And you were sharing your experience. My first question is ki, how you define Dr. Ambedkar in your own words?
So when I first visited India in 1986, I was planning to see all the great sites like Ajanta and Ellora and Bodh Gaya and so on. And shortly before I left, I went to a fundraising event in Cambridge, Massachusetts, held by the British Buddhists, the TBMSG group. And they showed a slideshow of Dr. Ambedkar's movement and his life. And I was deeply impressed with that. So I called Professor Eleanor Zelliot, who documented that movement back in the 60s in her doctoral work at Princeton University. And I said, so I want to meet these people. Who should I speak to? And she directed me to Vasant Moon, who was editing the complete writings and speeches of Baba Saheb Ambedkar in Mumbai, Professor Thorat, and many other great thinkers and activists in India who were followers of Baba Saheb Ambedkar. This changed my life in a way because I stayed with Vasant Moon in his apartment with Meenakshi Moon, his wife, who's also an activist. I met the Nimgadi family in Nagpur, where Moon was from, and Hira Nimgadi and Meenakshi Moon were sisters, and so I began to meet all of these people who were deeply involved in this movement. What is this movement? Well, it's the movement for what people used to call the untouchables. So that gets your attention. If I say the word untouchables in my classes at the university, people say, oh, that sounds very bad. I mean, I've heard that. What does it mean? And who is Ambedkar? And why are you talking about it? Well, because I teach religions, comparative religion, and Buddhism. And as you know, at the very end of his life, Dr. Ambedkar embraced Buddhism along with about 500,000 people. And that is probably the largest Buddhist gathering, maybe in history, at all one time to take refuge. So how did he get there? And how did he apply it to the struggle for human rights? So this has occupied me since the late 1980s, and I've written some articles and some things. I spent time in the library at Siddharth College in Mumbai studying his own copies of the Buddhist scriptures and other works, how he underlines his work to say what's important. What do we leave out, leave behind? Karma and rebirth that blames the victims. What do we emphasize? Educate. You know, agitate and organize, liberty, equality, fraternity. He saw those as Buddhist slogans. What could that mean? So I'm still working on these things, and I find it very, very enlightening.
What the first things came in your mind when you know about Dr. Ambedkar's journey, about their life struggle? You are a student, I think.
I was already teaching at Boston University at that time, and then I went across the river in Cambridge, Mass, to Harvard University. I was teaching. What struck me about him as a person is the great courage he had, because very early on, after getting his education, which was a major education with 2 PhDs from really fine, very selective universities and so on, he came back to India, and like Barack Obama, who left Harvard Law School and did not go to Wall Street, he went to Chicago to organize people in the poor areas. Barack Obama. Ambedkar did the same thing. He came back and he led the fight for drinking water in Mahad, 1927. And he spoke to all the women and said, get involved. You know, we need the women, we need everybody to take a sip of the water, to burn Manu. So he became very involved very early, and he faced all of the pressures and the hatred. He couldn't even get housing when he got back from his studies. He was hired by the Maharaja Baroda, as you know. He couldn't find housing. His staff wouldn't even enter the room. All these things. I thought, this is an incredible story. He's so brilliant, such a man. I mean, when he died, he had 50,000 volumes. He built Rajgriha. His library was huge. So I was struck by that. There's a funny personal thing too, that when I tell my students or my friends in India, they say, "Oh, that's a very..."
When you know about them.
Yeah. So I mean, what struck me was he worked so hard. He sacrificed so much, including his health. I mean, he did live to 65, but he was very ill at the end. My Sahib Ambedkar, who was a doctor, she took care of him. Savita Ambedkar took care of him in the end because he had such severe illness. But he never gave up, and he continued to struggle, and of course he has such a great resume, drafting the Constitution, all the things that he did, and all the books he wrote, which takes up a whole big shelf in my own library, all those blue books, all those blue books. So I mean, all of those things said to me, even though at the time I'm already in my 40s, this will take me the rest of my life to digest what he wrote and what he did. So I'm still working at it.
Okay, okay. When you know about Dr. Ambedkar and you were a teacher that time, right. You discussed your student about Dr. Ambedkar, and what was their reaction?
Okay, so what's very dramatic, Ashok, is that when you mention Ambedkar in the United States, maybe in Europe, in the Western world, people know about Gandhi. They'd never heard of Ambedkar. So you have to start from scratch, and you have to tell his story. Then you tell his thoughts, and you tell his vision of history. So I've done that because, of course, I've taught now since the 90s. Is called Buddhism and Social Change.
Okay.
And so he's a change agent who embraced Buddhism early in his life.
Okay.
He didn't convert till the end, but he was really studying and incorporating Buddhist thoughts all the way along. So I tried to convey that to my students. And of course, they're really paying deep attention because for a man, it's called, what we call this, a rags to riches story. Somebody who came from the very bottom and ended up at the very top of the new government in Nehru's cabinet. first law minister. We call that attorney general. That's a very big office and a very big responsibility.
Yes.
So this is an amazing story, and students pay close attention. But I have to say a footnote. When Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate economist teaching at Harvard, wrote a book a few years ago, he released it when he was at Harvard, called The Argumentative Indian. Immediately I looked in that book to see where is Ambedkar. He's an argumentative Indian, right? One of the most in 20th century for sure.
Yeah.
He's not in the book. He's in a footnote toward the end. So Dr. Sen, Professor Sen had a party releasing the book.
Okay.
It was mainly South Indian students at Harvard who came to that thing. There was maybe 100, 200 students in the room. He gave a talk. What is in my book? All these people. So Q&A, look around.
Are you there?
You were there. And so I raised my hand and said, where is Dr. Ambedkar in your book? Is he not the argumentative Indian of the 20th century? Professor Sen basically said, that's a very smart point, a very good point. Next question, please.
Oh, he very smart. He passed this question.
He just passed the question. He did not want to just... And I mean, I hate to say this because it sounds very casteist, but he is, even though a great economist of poverty, he sees the world kind of as a Brahmin. He is a Brahminical point of view. And Ambedkar maybe is somebody he does not want to truly engage. So you run into that, of course. And I look around India and I say, how many courses on Ambedkar are taught in the universities and colleges? A few. But how many? I mean, he's a founding father of the Republic. Shouldn't every social studies class in India and secondary level in high schools have an Ambedkar course, or shouldn't he be featured? It's not the case. Another thing, the Gandhi movie that Attenborough made in the 70s, which is so long that you have to take an intermission to eat popcorn and then come back and see that second half. Attenborough learned about Ambedkar when he was in India making that movie. He wanted to go back and make the Ambedkar movie.
Okay.
And so
He
wanted to make the Ambedkar movie because he was so impressed. Wow, this man is at least as great as Gandhi. And nobody knows, so my movie will be very interesting to people. He tried to get visas for his crew to go over. Indian government would not give visas for that movie.
Okay.
It never got made because the Indian government would not give visas and permissions for that movie.
Okay. तो सर कह रहे हैं कि गांधी पे जो मूवी बनाई थी एडनबरो ने, तो उसके बाद उन्होंने जो बाबा साहब डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर के बारे में भी जाना और वो उनके ऊपर भी मूवी बनाना चाहते थे, लेकिन इंडियन गवर्नमेंट ने तब की वीज़ा नहीं दिया ताकि वो काम कर सके. Indian government
in the 70s. The 70s. So that would be in Indira Gandhi government, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Or that Congress claim Ambedkar legacy that time.
That's right. So I mean, you hear story, you realize why is it that in Harvard University or Boston University or other great schools, they're not teaching courses on Ambedkar. Now here at Brandeis University, they're really embracing civil rights, human rights, and all these things. And so these conferences are here in Brandeis. This is a wonderful thing. First university to outlaw caste practice. This is a great thing. So how many other universities will actually do that? We will have to see. So I think all of us, you who are in the audience here of this program, have a responsibility. If you are reading Dr. Ambedkar and thinking about his unfinished legacy, you have a responsibility to talk to others. Start with your family and your friends. If you're in the professional world, see how his principles are being neglected or applied. Professor Torat was just asked, what about reservations in the public sector?
What do you think? All world students, all university students know about Gandhi, but they do not about Ambedkar.
Exactly.
Okay. What do you think? What happened that because of professor from India like Amar Sen did not recognize Ambedkar in their book and their work? This is the main thing, or you thought?
Gandhi was such a kind of almost like a circus character. He appears in a dhoti. You know, he goes to the round table conferences in the 30s in London with all these, British, lords and so on there. Dr. Ambedkar is dressed in his three-piece suit and his watch and so on. He doesn't look like an untouchable. Gandhi is saying, I'm the voice of the untouchables. And Ambedkar is saying, no, you're a caste Hindu. I'm the untouchable here. But Gandhi, you see, actually led the Satyagraha against the British, non-violent passive resistance, which is a powerful concept. And this was taken over by Martin Luther King Jr. and the black civil rights movement in the U.S. And Gandhi is truly a major voice for nonviolent social change. This is a good thing. And because of his unusual appearance and because of his willingness to practice, to sacrifice his health, to threaten to commit suicide to get what he wanted, this gets everybody's attention. And he's a Mahatma, a holy man. What do you think of India? India is full of holy men. So what's a holy man? Well, there's a guy who's fighting for independence, for example. Well, that's not what most holy men were doing, but that's what he did. So he really kind of created a new concept. Of course, for Dr. Ambedkar, this can be a big problem. And when he even presented the draft constitution in 1948, he said there are a couple of things that can ruin our new country. One is violent social change. The other is worshiping personalities, creating Mahatmas, because it's up to each of us to be a democracy, not to look to certain, Mahatmas and so on. So he and Gandhi, but as we were just hearing, Ambedkar compromised with Gandhi in order to get things done. And so the Constitution is actually...
Yeah, like Pune Pact issues, because there are lots of problems. If Dr. Ambedkar do not patch up with Gandhi, so upper caste people hit the Dalits of India.
Yes, and he had to back down because it looked like Gandhi was really willing to die for that issue. So he said, I don't want to be responsible for that. So, I mean, in so many ways, you look at every aspect of Ambedkar's life and his thought and all his various interests in his intellectual work. You say, this is a major figure. He's so interesting. So interesting.
Okay, I have just two questions.
Yeah.
First one, when you go to India and met lots of people who is Ambedkarite, who is Buddhist, and you talked about the people of from that community have their flags, blue flags, and they paste the stickers and something in their wall through Dhammachakra. So, what was your experience with that all things?
So wherever you go, even in the diaspora here, where you have expat Dalit Indians who are successful now and working in IT or whatever they are, they will have little ceremonies where they have an altar and they will have Baba Saheb Ambedkar and Lord Buddha, and they'll have the candles and flowers and an offering, and they will say Namo Tassa, Bhagavato, Arahato, all of that, and the refuges and so on. They will get that out of the way and then talk politics, okay, or talk social change and so on. So what is the role really of this Buddhism that was so deeply important to Ambedkar from the early time? He went to college and somebody gave him a biography of the Buddha, and he read it and he said, wow, that's amazing. So all his life he's becoming slowly actually a Buddhist. So at the end of his life he embraces that. What does that mean today? I mean, is it still important? Is it still useful? What does Buddhism have to offer? Is it about rebirth and karma? Is it about superstition? Is it about deities or something? No, not for Ambedkar. Navayana, New Vehicle Buddhism, means those other slogans he talked about: educate, agitate, organize, liberty, equality, fraternity. Those were actually for him Buddhist ideas. He said, I learned those from Lord Buddha, not from the French Revolution. And what does it really mean? It means that everybody has a responsibility to try to reach out in community. You know, the Samta Sanik Dal, the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, he founded in the 30s. What are these young people taught to do? Reach out, help somebody learn to read, help them if they are poor, try to get your own education and be a social worker of some kind, whatever you're doing. So that's the new Buddhism. And I think other Buddhists, other parts of the world, whether it's Japan or anywhere, can learn from Dr. Ambedkar's version of Buddhism by saying, how did he live his life as a Buddhist? And then to say, well, I can do that too. Meditation, I think, is important. Many do. Some people say, I don't have time for it, or I think it puts you to sleep.
Yes.
Really wakes you up, actually, because Buddha means awake.
Yeah. Lots of universities talking about diversities.
Yes.
And they are giving chance for to marginalize their universities. Okay. these days when people know about Dr. Ambedkar and people like you who knows about Dr. Ambedkar
Yeah.
and impressed about their work, that time the universities of America and all other countries
Yeah.
should be start should be start a chapter on Dr. Ambedkar in their syllabus.
It's not the role of the university. A university should be a place where students and faculty can start their own group.
Faculty.
And you know, at Boston University and Harvard University, there are 200, 300 student groups. Every subject you can imagine, from sports to cultural things, art things, and religious things, and so on. Every group should be respected and supported in some way. And usually a university has a huge budget to give to these groups, and they have to apply every year.
that's
Give us
clear.
so much money.
That's clear.
That's what they should do, support it with the money, and give them a space to meet and respect them. And don't allow something that happened to, you know, Vemula to be kicked out of housing, lose his scholarship because he's a member of the Ambedkar Association. That's a disaster.
How can Dr. Ambedkar reach to every student? Because Dr. Ambedkar was a great student. Okay,
Yeah.
you know about them, what they
yeah.
did. So what do you think? How can they reach with the in world student?
Say it again?
How can Dr. Ambedkar reach to students in all over university? What can we do?
Well, the funny thing is, in this university and University of Massachusetts and at Columbia University, they're putting a bust of his head in the library. And so a student comes in, they see this bust, they say, who is that guy? Who is that guy? And they read what it is, and they say, oh, I never heard of that. Maybe they will then go to a book and look at a book. That's one thing they can do, is keep his name alive. Then there should be courses about him, or he should be included in the curriculum for political science, for religion, for Buddhism, all over the curriculum, because he had so many different interests and contributions. So included into the instruction would also symbolically show that he's a great figure in history, you know? He's at least as great. How many universities have an image of Gandhi? Well, not many. So let's get the Ambedkar image up there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
so much,
Ashok.
Professor
It's a
Christopher.
pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you
Good
so
luck
much.
in all your work. You're reaching so many people.
Thank you so much. So,
Thank you.
प्रोफेसर क्रिस्टोफर थे जिन्होंने डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर को लेके जो उनके अनुभव थे, बुद्धिज़्म को लेके जो डॉक्टर उनके अनुभव थे, और किस तरीके से भारत के बाहर जो इंटेलेक्चुअल अमर्त्य सेन जैसे लोग रहते हैं, आते हैं, वो लोग भी किस तरीके से जब काम करते हैं तो डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर की लेगेसी को, उनके बारे में बात करना ज़रूरी नहीं समझते, और जब सवाल उठाते हैं क्रिस्टोफर जैसे लोग तो उसको पास ऑन कर देते हैं। ये बताता है कि जाति किस तरीके से काम करती है। देखते रहिए दलित दस्तक। जय भीम।
Jai Bhim. Jai Bhim.
हाँ, लोग तो जय भीम।